So now we're going to evaluate the related series of each sequence. This one is number 17 on the review. So the first thing I need to identify is what everything is. Now, Sn means our sum. U1 is our first term. R is our ratio. And N is our number of terms. So I have to find that out for each of these, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So this is my first term of the sequence. So I'm going to highlight in yellow, everything's my first term. 2, -1, -2, -2. Now to find that ratio, I'm trying to figure out what everything is being multiplied by. So to get from 2 to 12, it's multiplying by 6. 12 to 72, and then so forth. So my ratio here is going to be a 6. Now if you can't see that, take your last term, divide it by the previous term, get that value, and see if that's the same when you divide 72 by 12. From -5 to 5, 5 to -25, I'm multiplying by a -5. Once again, you can divide to find out that value. Here, to change from negatives to positive, obviously it's a negative. 2 times 3 is what gives me the 6. And this last one down here, I'm multiplying by 6s. Once again, taking any term, dividing it by the previous is going to give you that ratio. You just need to make sure that ratio is consistent for all of them. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to find out the number of terms. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So N is going to be 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. N is 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. N is 5. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So N is 5. So everywhere I see N, I substitute 5. Everywhere I see U1, I substitute my first term, or 5 or 4, sorry. And everywhere that I see my R, I substitute in my ratio. So for number 1, S of 4 terms, my sum of the 4 terms, is my first term, which is 2, times 1 minus my ratio, which is 6, raised to the 4th power. Now this is really important. You want to realize that you are here raising the 6 to the 4. Do not put the 4 on the outside. A lot of students put that 4 on the outside, completely incorrect. Make sure it stays on the inside. It's only being applied to that 6, our ratio. Now I'm dividing by a 1 minus my ratio. Now, I'm going to go through and set them all up, and then we'll use the calculator to evaluate them. Number 2, S of 4 terms again. My first term is a -1. 1 minus -5. Notice I'm putting this -5 in parentheses. I highly suggest anytime you use fractions or negatives in the calculator, you always put them into parentheses. So I'm now raising it to the number of terms. In this case is a 4. Notice that the 4 is on the outside, not inside. I'm not just raising the 5 to the 4th power, but also the negative, which is going to make it a positive value. Had I just applied it on the inside, it would be applying to the 5 only, which would give me a negative value. And again, it's a 1 minus my -5. Notice again, my parentheses. So I'm going to double page here so I can finish writing them out. So for number 3, S of 5 terms is going to be my initial value, and then 1 minus my ratio of -3. And that's going to be raised to the fact that I have 5 terms. Once again, it's a 1 minus -3. Number 4, that is S of 5 terms, sum of 5 terms. My first term being the -2, my ratio being the 6, and I'm raising that ratio right there to the 5th power. And again, it's a 1 minus my ratio of 6. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to actually simplify them all. I highly suggest you do the numerator and denominator separate for each. Otherwise, you have to put in a lot of parentheses and it could completely mess it up. So if I use my calculator to evaluate this first one, I'm going to have 2 times 1 minus 6 raised to the 4th. Bring it over to close off that parentheses, hit enter. -2590. So I'm actually going to shrink this up a little bit. If I can find, whoops, my little 1 second. Shrink this up. All right. Shrink that up so I can work with this back and forth more easily. All right, so negative 2, 5, 9, 0. And I know that 1 minus 6 is a negative 5. Now I'm going to divide. So now I'm going to divide by the negative 5, and I get a final answer of 518. So this first answer is a 518. The second one, once again, putting that into my calculator, negative 1 times 1 minus. Make sure you're using the negative 5 down here, not the minus sign. And make sure you're using the minus here because we are subtracting. This one is raised to the 4th using that caret. Closing that off, and I have 624. 624, 1 minus negative 5 is 6. Again, you're saying 1 minus a negative 5, giving me that 6. So 624 divided by 6 is going to give me 104. That's my second answer. The next one, I'm going to substitute all that in. Negative 2 times 1 minus negative 3 raised to the 5th. Close that off, and I get negative 488. Divided by 1 minus negative 3 is a 4. And so I'm just going to go ahead and divide that by the value of 4. And I get negative 122. And the last one down here, negative 2 times 1 minus 6 raised to the 5th. Close that off, and I end up with 15,550. Dividing that by a negative 5, 1 minus 6 is a negative 5. And I end up with negative 3,110. So that is how we're going to do all of these. This formula will be given to you on your exam. You just have to know what every variable represents. All right. You're visiting Baltimore, Maryland, and a taxi company charges a flat fee of $3 for using the taxi and 75 cents per mile. Anytime you see the words per mile, that kind of helps you to realize that's your rate change. So it's a flat fee of $3. That's not going to change. And 75 cents per mile. What ends up happening is this becomes my slope, and this flat fee is my y-intercept. No matter how far I travel, I have to charge that $3. As soon as I get in that cab, that's $3 right there. So, first one is write an equation you could use to find the cost of the taxi ride in Baltimore, Maryland. They want you to let x be the number of miles and y be the total cost. Make sure you're using the variables they want you to use. So y would equal my slope of 0.75x plus my flat fee of 3. I'm just going to put the number 3. How much would it cost for 8 miles? Well, I know that my miles is my x. The cost depends on my miles. So if cost depends on my miles, y depends on x. Your y's depend on your x's. So x is my independent, and that's what I'm going to substitute in is 8 for the x. So y equals 0.75 times 8 plus 3. So if you need to use your calculator again, 0.75 times 8 plus 3. You can use the parentheses like I have drawn out and get that as well. Your final answer for that would be $9. Now, choice C. Taxi was $15. How much did the taxi travel? So my cost is 15. We've already determined that x is the miles and y is the cost. So 15 is my y, 0.75x plus 3. So now I'm solving for x. I subtract 3, and I have 12 equals 0.75x. I'm still solving for x, so at this point, I have to divide by 0.75. Notice my x is remaining on the right side. It's not on the left. I'm not switching it. I'm not moving things around. Very key for whenever you end up with inequalities that you keep your variables always on the same side so that you don't mess that up. So if I take 12 and divide it by 0.75, I'm going to get that total mileage was 16 miles. So in total, I traveled 16